What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast, or if you're watching here on YouTube, this is just another critic, and today we're going to be talking about week 2 of college football, going over the top 8 matchups of this week. When I was looking at the schedule this week, there wasn't actually many big games as far as teams in the top 25. There's still a lot of top-ranked teams that are playing cupcakes this week, so we're going to be going over the top 8 that I believe are some of the big matchups of this week and to keep an eye out for. Now, getting into this week, I wanted to start off with Mississippi State and Kansas State. Now, if you've been following college football, you already know that Nick Fitzgerald is suspended for the first 2 games of the college football season. So he won't be playing in this game versus K-State. And when I was kind of looking at the game tape that Mississippi State just played versus Stephen F. Austin, their backup quarterback, touchdowns wise, he had 5 TDs. But what a lot of people may have missed is that I believe his completion percentage was 41%. I think it was about 31 attempts, 13 completions. And that was against Stephen F. Austin. So obviously K-State had a rough start as well versus South Dakota, but it's unlikely that they're going to have 2 crappy games in a row, especially with the Coach Snyder. So coming into this game, a lot of people, just looking at the game for what it is, may think that Mississippi State's just going to run through K-State. But if I had to say, this would likely be my upset pick of the week, being K-State. But as far as a score, a prediction, if I were to say, I do think Mississippi State is the more talented team. They've certainly got a good defense to shut down just about everything K-State can throw at them. But K-State defensively can certainly shut down the second-string QB. Thinking about this game, it could be really low scoring, but if I did have to throw a score out there, my final score is Mississippi State 31, Kansas State 21. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas State came out on top and ended up winning this game. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and move into the second matchup of the week, and I actually have Duke versus Northwestern. Now, this is actually I actually love watching these types of teams play. It's always just a battle, gritty battle to the end. Northwestern obviously coming off a 10-3 season. Duke always, feisty and competitive enough to give you a tough, 2 to 3 quarters, but they rarely can really pull out the W in the ACC or typically when they go out of conference. But I do like Duke. They're always going to give you a run for your money. In this game, obviously Duke had a nice opener versus Army, and then Northwestern. I think Northwestern is one of the more slept-on teams in the Big Ten Conference. Like I mentioned, they went 10-3 last season. Just came off a win versus Purdue. And in this game, I think Northwestern, they've got the quarterback, Thorson, back. They looked pretty good in Purdue early on, and they're typically a pretty stout defensively. And my final score for this prediction was actually 27-37. Northwestern takes the W. Duke 27, Northwestern 37. I really like this matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a closer game, like a 3-point game. And I could even see Duke pulling this game out. Even so, last year it was a really close game, came down to the wire. But yeah, with that being said, moving into the third matchup of the week, I have Nebraska Cornhuskers versus Colorado CU. Obviously, Scott Frost just got to Nebraska, so a lot of people are excited to see what he can do with this program. If he can actually turn it around, he's definitely got the offensive mindset to have a powerhouse offensive team. he typically likes to have a dual threat quarterback. I think that's why he went with the freshman Adrian Martinez. And we didn't get a chance to see them last week. Obviously, that game was canceled or postponed. Um, so a lot of people are excited to see what Scott Frost can bring to the table this year. Obviously, they're not expecting him to do anything crazy, or compete for the Big Ten, but they're definitely expecting him to get some wins under his belt. They're going to be playing against, obviously, a really good Colorado team. They've got, I believe his name is Steven Montez at the quarterback position for Colorado. He looked really good in the opener versus Colorado State. Obviously, we've got the final score there, which was 45-13. And they have a big play wide receiver. I didn't get his name, but he's actually number 2 for the University of Colorado. Looked really good, made a lot of big plays. And I'm expecting him to go off. I have Colorado winning this game. And let's see what my final score was. It was actually 42-24. I've got Colorado beating Nebraska. And something to keep in mind is that Nebraska hasn't necessarily had the best defense throughout the past few years. Even Scott Frost at UCF hasn't necessarily had the best defense. They gave up a lot of points and typically outscored their opponents. So in this game, I don't think they're where they're at. Where I don't think Nebraska is offensively where they need to be at in order to accomplish what Scott Frost is trying to get done just yet. I'm sure maybe midway through 3/4 of the season, they'll start firing on all cylinders. But at this point, I went ahead and took Colorado 42-24 over Nebraska. And I just can't see Nebraska pulling this one out just because they actually gave up 50 points in their last 3 games of the season last year. 50 points. So coming into this game, like I mentioned, Colorado goes ahead and takes it. Moving into our next matchup, we have Penn State and Pitt. Now, there's definitely a lot of question marks surrounding Penn State with, not necessarily Trace McSorley. He's a playmaker. A lot of people have him as a Heisman candidate, but losing Saquon Barkley, Gesicki at the tight end position, 2 of their biggest impact players from last season. And then we kind of saw, how big of an impact that was in that Appalachian State game. Obviously went down to OT. Appalachian State almost pulled it out, and giving up 38 points to, given an Appalachian State always comes prepared, and they're always ready to pull an upset. So we're gonna get more of our questions answered in this next game versus Pitt. Was it just kind of a game where they're still figuring things out? But with Penn State, Trace McSorley, he's a hard guy to beat. That guy competes to the last second of every game, as you saw multiple times last year, especially in that Iowa game, winning it on the last drive of the game. Coming into this game versus Pitt, I think they're going to be looking to sharpen things up, make a statement. Franklin probably ripped them a new one after that game versus Appalachian State. And coming into this game, I have Penn State going ahead and winning this game comfortably versus Pitt, 38-20. I know a few of you guys are thinking Pitt, may pull the upset again, as they did a few years ago. But I think Penn State's going to go ahead and take this game and win comfortably versus Pitt, 38-20. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the 5th matchup of the week. And we have the USC Trojans versus Stanford Cardinal. Now, this game, obviously Pac-12, these are typically the two of the best teams in the Pac-12. And, man, I know USC, they obviously won the last 2 matchups versus Stanford, both last season. One in the regular season game, and I think it was part of the conference championship or division championship. And now coming into this season, USC lost Sam Darnold. They've got a freshman quarterback, JT Daniels, but a solid freshman wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. As you know, they both played at Mater Dei, so they've definitely got some chemistry there. But coming into this game, I think Stanford they're just going to be too much. I think Bryce Love is going to go ahead and get his running game going. As we saw, Whiteside looked pretty solid in the opener versus San Diego State. And the Stanford defense, I think, is actually better than most people give them credit. But obviously, you got USC. They've got the talent to, compete and really win every game comfortably. They just haven't been able to put it together just yet. And looking at their first performance, versus UNLV is just a poor team, a really poor team, and I expected USC to not only not allow 21 points, given 21 points isn't a crazy amount, but with USC's defense, their returning starters, um, and some of the vets they have on that defense, I just didn't see them giving 21 points up to this UNLV team. And then they had a really slow start, eventually got it going, and then won the game pretty comfortably. But coming into the Stanford game, Stanford, I think, is gonna, key in on JT Daniels, put some pressure on him, force him to get the ball out early. And I think at the end of the day, Stanford's just going to come in with a better game plan, more experience, and get the W. I actually have the final score here: Stanford 31, USC 17. Now, with that being said, a lot of people are hyped up on USC, JT Daniels, because of his potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if he turns into a wonder kid and pulls something out of his and ends up getting the W. But based on what I've seen, I've got to go with Stanford. There's just more experience, Bryce Love, a decent passing game. But if they can shut down Whiteside and make Stanford one-dimensional, and force Bryce Love to carry the load, it may be a closer game than expected. But like I mentioned, I've got Stanford, final score 31, USC 17. Moving on to the next matchup, we have Michigan State and Arizona State. Obviously, we've got Herm Edwards, who just took over the program at Arizona State. Michigan State coming off of a rough win over Utah State, given Utah State actually looked really good offensively and had their moments defensively. So I'm kind of questioning whether or not Utah State is actually a pretty good team coming into this year. But with that being said, Michigan State, still a lot of questions to be answered. They've got the most returning starters coming into the FBS this year, I believe. It was about 9 on each side of the ball almost. But with that being said, 31 points given up to a Utah State team with all that experience, and then a slow start on offense, but eventually pulled out the close win at the end. You had Bocce go ahead and come up with that game-winning interception. And then we have Arizona State, just not too sure if they're the real deal just yet. So I think this is really going to be a good test for both teams coming into this week, getting a better look at Arizona State. Was this Herm Edwards? Obviously, Herm Edwards, we're gonna have to give him more than one season to grade his actual coaching performance. But definitely a nice start for Arizona State, 49-7 versus San Antonio. But with that being said, like I mentioned, we've got question marks for both teams coming into this game. Is Michigan State the real deal? Was last year, kind of a fluke? Because before last year, the year before, they had a really poor season, a losing season. But yeah, I'm excited to see both of these teams on the field. Michigan State, they've really got to go out there and prove themselves, because a lot of people are overreacting, not only to Michigan State but as well as Penn State. We all already covered that. But yeah, Michigan State. My final prediction was Michigan State 45, and I've got Arizona State 34. I just think Michigan State's defense is still going to have some struggles coming into this game. Could possibly be a high-scoring battle all the way down to the end. Those type of games where we've got the last team to possess the ball gets the win. It certainly could come to that, just like this Utah State game. But I went ahead and took Michigan State 45-34 over Arizona State. Wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State goes in there and blows them out either. So with that being said, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next matchup. As you know, this is probably one of the bigger matchups of the week besides the USC and Stanford game. We've got Clemson and Texas A&M. Now, coming into this game, my biggest thing with Clemson is just what's going on with them offensively. They seem to always start slow in almost every game. And Kelly Bryant, I don't know, man. Kelly Bryant, I just don't see it with him. Trevor Lawrence, I think Trevor Lawrence is eventually going to take the starting position, possibly midway through the season or even 3 quarters of the season. He's going to take that starting position. He's just more efficient. He can do more. He's definitely not as athletic as Kelly Bryant, but I think he provides a better dynamic for the Clemson offense. And then obviously we've got Jimbo Fisher over at Texas A&M. He's certainly had the chance to play against this Clemson team, not necessarily this team, but Dabo Swinney multiple times when he was coaching at FSU. So I'm sure he does have some familiarity with playing against Dabo Swinney's schemes and what type of things he likes to run. But coming into this game, I believe Clemson's defense is just going to be too much. Obviously, that front four is just fatal. It's fatal. They really don't give up much. But like I said, the only thing that I'm worried about coming into this game is Clemson offensively. Other than that, the defense should shut down Texas A&M pretty comfortably. Now, my final score coming into this game is actually 37-13. I don't think Texas A&M is going to be able to get much going. Quarterback's probably not going to have much time, and even if they try to get that running game going, it's going to get blown up. So I just don't think Texas A&M has a chance coming into this game just because of how ridiculous that Clemson defensive line is. Like I mentioned, final score Clemson 37, Texas A&M 13. With that being said, we're going to move into the last matchup of the week, and that is Georgia versus South Carolina. Big matchup in the I almost said the Big Ten, but it's actually the SEC. And Georgia, obviously, this matchup last year was 24-10, and Georgia pulled it out by 2 touchdowns. Obviously, they had a freshman quarterback in Jake Fromm, and they were still figuring things out. Now, with that being said, coming into this game, Georgia's got Fromm again, as well as Fields if they need him. But I think this is going to be one of the better matchups of the week. This is probably the biggest game of the week with the most consequences, for lack of better terms. And both teams have question marks coming into this game. Now, we've obviously got Muschamp over at South Carolina and Kirby at Georgia. And he's done a phenomenal job turning the program around. And as you can see, he's starting to pull in those recruits. So if not this year, throughout the next, 5 to 10 years, if Kirby stays there that long, Georgia's going to become one of the top 3 teams for the next decade. And they're just going to be ridiculous with talent. But with that being said, this has the possibility of being a really close game, a low-scoring game. But my final score is actually, I have Georgia winning it 41-21. I think DeAndre Swift's going to have a breakout game. Jake Fromm has been efficient. He's grown. And I think he's just continued to grow is what I'm trying to say. He's gotten better and better throughout this offseason. And the talent at Georgia is just getting better as well. Georgia's got a pretty decent O-line. And South Carolina, they do have some offensive weapons. But, man, Georgia's just going to be too much. I've got them, like I mentioned, 41-21. Georgia wins it. But with that being said, I actually have a few more games to go over. And it's actually just some honorable mention games that'll be fun to watch. We've got UCLA Bruins as well as the Oklahoma Sooners. They're going ahead in a matchup. I'm excited to see if, what type of adjustments Chip Kelly's going to make coming into week 2. And then I just want to continue to see more of Kyler Murray. He's obviously a talented guy, dual threat guy. He's a playmaker. And then they've got Rodney in the backfield. I do have him as a Heisman candidate, slowly sneaking into the race. Um, but it's going to be scary because UCLA has the possibility of getting blown out in this one, just annihilated. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I don't necessarily have predictions for this one, for these games. Oklahoma should take this game pretty comfortably. Oklahoma with the W, no issues. But I just want to see what type of adjustments Chip Kelly goes ahead and makes, because I know he has DTR in the backfield, and Spates is somewhat injured, supposedly. So excited to watch that game. Wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a high-scoring game. I'm still not too sure if that Oklahoma defense is legit, and we're just going to continue to see if that's the case as the season goes on. With that being said, moving on to the Florida and Kentucky game. Florida is obviously they always have the talent, and defensively they've had the recruits. It's just been obviously a matter of coaching, and they've got Dan Mullen there, and obviously they destroyed in their week 1 opener. So I'm just excited to see what he's been able to put together, and what type of numbers we're going to be able to see from him and his team in this week 2 FBS matchup. So I do have Florida winning this game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a close one with Kentucky because of the growing pains that you're going to go through with a new head coach. And then the last game of my honorable mention list is Iowa versus Iowa State. Obviously, rivalry games are always fun to watch. Iowa, Big Ten, Iowa State, Big 12. Both teams, very gritty teams, always play to the end, always play hard. I think this will be a fun game to watch, and I think it's going to come down to the wire. But I do have Iowa winning it by a very close margin. But with that being said, guys, those are my top 8 matchups for the week, as well as the honorable mentions we just went over. Definitely appreciate you guys sticking around to the end if you are still here. If you're listening on the podcast, I appreciate the support. If you guys have a few matchups that I missed, or you have your own opinions, just drop them in the comments or connect with me on Twitter at JustAnotherCritic. With that being said, like I mentioned, if you agree with me, great. If you don't, awesome. I'm just another critic, just another guy who loves watching the game. But yeah, with that being said, appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.